Hola, amigas y amigos. Welcome to the MíraLA Podcast. I'm your host, Arianna Lemus. This podcast is by women, for women, and anyone willing to listen to women. Enjoy the show. I am so proud to share that we are shooting our podcast episode at Capture 12 Studio in DTLA. Thank you so much for having the MíraLA Podcast here. Isabel Grace is a woman-owned florist business. Aside from making beautiful bouquets for every occasion, she and her team plan events to help you celebrate all of your family celebrations and milestones. From baby showers, birthdays, graduations, and weddings, Isabel Grace is a proud sponsor of the MíraLA Podcast, providing all of our guests their favorite arrangement of flowers. In this episode, I interview Alejandra Quiroz. She is a Honduran filmmaker based in Los Angeles. She is passionate for amplifying BIPOC voices both in front and behind the camera, particularly focusing on Central American voices. In 2020, she launched her podcast, Central American Voices, sharing the stories from Central Americans from across the globe. In 2022, she founded Arlu Productions to create powerful films and bring underrepresented narratives to the screen. Please welcome Alejandra. Alejandra, hola, ¿cómo estás?
Good. Muchas gracias por tenerme aquí. I'm so excited.
This is going to be a really beautiful conversation. We've met briefly over Zoom. We got to talk about a creative project that you, myself, and Brenda are going to be working on. So we'll save that for last. But to dive into your story, talk to me about what it was like to grow up in Honduras.
Yeah, well, again, thank you for having me. And so I was born and raised in Tegucigalpa, which is the capital of Honduras. However, my family, from my mom's side, is from a little town called Reitoca. And so I always describe my childhood as of like, I would go to school in Tegucigalpa and all like the city, but every time like vacation or even any other weekend, I would go to this small little town. So like, I feel like I grew up very surrounded by like nature and surrounded by like the town, like pueblo life, that like sometimes I felt a little bit of like, I don't know, like that this shift of like being in the city and then going back and seeing my cousins over there, like something in me like quite didn't feel right. Does that make sense? I feel like when growing up in Honduras, I was still having those type of thought of like, what is this like weird mix of like being in the city and you're surrounded by like all these things, and then I go to like the town and it's like it's very like low key, and like I'm going like to pick up like la leche or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like a lot of people that like at the city, I feel like I didn't connect with their experiences with that, but like because they would travel outside of the country, but for me it was like vacationing in my mom's town. So like I always like had those like thought of like, oh, like I wonder why, you know what I mean? But I'm always being so grateful, and that like I consider myself like I'm a Reitoca native, you know what I mean? So that was a lot of my life growing up. It's just like going back to the town of my mom and like seeing like all like, you know, everybody, my grandma, and surrounded by like so many women. Like my whole family is like run by women.
I love that. That's amazing.
Like, my only male, was like my dad, but I feel like my whole life was surrounded by so strong women that like, those were my role models. And like, they were like, oh yeah, you can do like this, everything you can, So like seeing them and like growing up in the pueblo and like city and like type of life, it was always very amazing. Yeah,
that's amazing. And how long did you grow up there until you came over to the States?
Yes, until I came over to the States. It was 14 years that I lived in Honduras. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I went to all like women school.
Oh,
too.
Wow.
It was a Catholic all women school. I think I shouldn't mention that. So for my culture shock.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah, like coming to the States and then getting immersed into like a school with boys,
Yes.
and then it's like American culture. So like, what was that experience like? You were 14, you came from Honduras. Like, what was that experience like? Like, take me back to like your 14-year-old self. Like, where was your headspace at?
I think I feel like when I moved here was a lot of mixed emotion, because like the reason that I migrated here was because of my parents' divorce was one, and also because my country went through a coup, right? So like, because my country went to a coup d'etat, el golpe de estado, what happened is that my mom like job kind of like slowed down, right? So my mom was like, you know what, I think it's time that we have to move to the States. So then I moved to the States, not knowing nothing of this language. So of course it was very like scary. But I think the first culture shock was that. Like going to school, there was like a lot of like, you know, boys and girls, and it's like nothing bad, but it's just I never experienced that, you know? So it was just like I felt like very outside. And also because of like being, you know, from Honduras, I feel like when I went to the ESL part of it, like a lot of time I wasn't feeling like I belong there because of how I would speak, like my slang, my words. And like, so it was honestly very culture shocking. But no, like I see back of my 14-year-old self, and like I wish I can go and hug her, because of course like she was going like to a whole like transition of culture, transition of like countries, but like not knowing anything of the language, having to like adjust to like a different life, but also trying to accept that like you no longer have the family that I had before, you know, because it was due to divorce. And also like, you know, like as an immigrant, I felt like I knew that at the moment I arrived here, like, I don't know when I'm going back. So it was like the moment that I was like, I have to accept all those things that I'm leaving behind.
All the changes.
Yeah, all the changes. So like sometimes I took back and I was like, I wish I can go hug myself. You know what I mean? Because it's like, it was just a lot for a 14-year-old. And like, I went straight to high school. It's not that I had a middle school. Like, it was straight to like high school. So yeah, it was very interesting, hard. But honestly, like, once I go look back at it, like, yes, I want to hug myself. But it's like, I also think of like how resilient and how I get to like appreciate those years that I might have felt left out, or like that I didn't feel like belong here, or even question it like so many times. I was like, I just want to go back to Honduras so bad.
Yes.
You know?
And like a lot of your story is now empowering the voices, right? Your podcast, Central American Voices, and you being a filmmaker and changing the narrative of like how we see Central Americans, right? Especially here in the States. So, you know, talk to me about not only being a filmmaker here, but also the experience of being undocumented, right? Because I feel like a lot of people are like lack education, or they just don't really know like the severity of what it means to be undocumented.
Yeah, I think like for me to say like being a filmmaker, when I arrived here in the States, like I said, like I was very aware that I was gonna be undocumented. You know, like I knew there was nothing else. I know like because I arrived in 2011, and by 2012, sorry, DACA got approved, which is a protection status for kids who came to the States before the age of 16. But the law only was for people who have been living here for 5 years. So even though like I was already here and I qualified for everything, but my arrival time was of course kind of hard, because like I was like, when that law was approved, I was like, okay, like I don't know if I can go to college. I don't know if I can even do anything. You know, like is my life only gonna be like going to find any job that I can acquire, like, you know? And I felt like, of course I felt sad, but a lot of like, I was just like, no, there has to be a way. I feel like I was always like, it has to be a way, because I always wanted to go to college. And when I moved to the state, I knew I could pursue my actual dream. Because in Honduras, there's no filming industry. You know, there's not like you can pursue filmmaking in Honduras. And for me, when I got here, I was like, okay, I want to pursue what I really love since I was little, you know? And I was like, okay, like, let's try it. And I remember I went to the community center in my high school. And I said, is there a way that I can apply? So they explained to me how like DreamHack works in California. By the way, I am so grateful that I live in California. You know what I mean?
Why don't you talk to us about that? Because I feel like a lot of people, again, don't really know the severity or the experience of what that means.
Yeah. So, I mean, just like I'm fully undocumented. So I don't have a TPS, I don't have DACA. And so for to go to college, a lot of time for other states, like if you're fully undocumented, you will have to most likely go to a private school where they can fund your, like, give you a full ride scholarship. Here in California, you can go to public university like Cal States, UCs, and all stuff because they do have what is called a DreamHack. So what is a DreamHack is for anybody who arrived before the age of 16 here in California. And then you needed to complete at least a minimum of 3 years in the California high school or like even earn a GNE. And then you don't have to have any valid visa, you know, so as long as you qualify for that. So like how other people does, like they go and apply to FAFSA, we go and apply to DreamHack. But of course, it's very tricky because like, even though like, yeah, like I was like, okay, I could qualify for this. But then when they approved me, I still remember the number. They approved me for, I think it was like $1,180. And that needs to be split in a year. So technically I had like 500 something per semester. That's not going to cover any schools. At the time, 2015, for me, it was like, they want to prove that you actually like want to continue college. And so you are forced to go and apply to scholarship. And there's a lot of scholarship that you cannot qualify because the first requirement is, are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a resident, like a legal resident, or do you have? And of course, it's, again, very discouraging. However, I was very thankful, and to God, honestly, to everybody, that I met this amazing mentor in Boys and Girls Club. She was fully undocumented. She went to UCLA fully undocumented, and she was like the one, like, you can do it. You can do it, you can do it. And like, it was like that support that you needed. And like, I remember applying to Northridge, which was a school that I could never fathom and imagine that I was gonna get accepted, you know?
Cal State Northridge.
Yeah, Cal State Northridge. And I'm honestly like, at this point, I was like, I would go to a community college if I have to, you know what I mean? But I just never imagined because of so many things, like even my college counselor would tell me like, oh, like, yeah, people from ESL graduate in 5 years, or sometimes they cannot go to college. Like, there was a lot of comments like that when I was in high school. So having someone tell me like, yes, you can do it. I applied to Northridge. Out of 20 schools that I applied, that was the only one that accepted me. And one day, I went to the Boys and Girls Club, and because I got a scholarship through them, and they were like, oh, let me give you that scholarship earlier so you can go and put it all, because I only have 1,180, you know?
Right.
And I go into my portal on Northridge, and my school is fully paid. And that was because Northridge has their own DreamHack scholarship.
Shout out Cal State Northridge.
Yes.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah. And like a lot of like CSU schools has that, because my brother has that too. And it's like, it was one of the moments, like I remember to this day, like I was crying because like I never could have imagined that like that was a possibility. Like, and remember when I told you, like people would tell me like, oh yeah, you graduated, like it was only 3 years. I graduated high school when I was like 3 years and a half of arriving here. I went to college even like speaking a little minimal English. So like, it was like, of course, a lot. But when I went there, and I think like going back, sorry, like if I'm gonna like talk a little bit.
But I'm a little neurodivergent myself, so I kind of hop around in my storytell too.
I think like when I finally was like, okay, I can actually go to college and I can actually pursue my the career that I want, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do filmmaking. And the reason why I decided filmmaking is going back to where I'm come from. Because every time I would say that I was Honduran, they would always say like gangs, corruption. And it's like, we're more than that. Like, we're human beings who like have dreams and aspirations. There's so many people who are amazing in my country, and not only in my country, in whole like Latin America, but like every time I will mention my identity or where I come from, it was always responded with negative. And I understood that that was because of media, because how much media portrayed us on the screen.
Right.
You know, like to this day, I feel like if you research a lot of Honduran filmmaking, like mostly it's our gangs. That's so sad. Like we have beautiful stories,
It's so
you know?
true.
And so that was the main reason why I decided to pursue filmmaking, was because I was like, if I want to change something, or like what I said, like even if it's like un granito de arroz, like something in this life for my community, like can at least be something that like see us like humans, like as just normal people who have a dream, who have aspiration, who can do anything in life aside from drug, corruption, and gangs. Shout out to Cal State Northridge because they are the only ones who have a Central American department. So I was able to major in filmmaking and Central American studies.
Everything is created twice, once in the mind and once in the material world. I'm a certified dream builder. I made it my mission to share the beautiful work that Mary Morrissey did with the Brave Thinking Institute. I believe in sharing that knowledge will heal our world one dream at a time.
The most important thing in this world is imagination. It's so important to be connected to your vision. That vision is key to get new results.
I'm going to be 77. What I got out of Saturday was an opportunity to identify who I am and what I need. And it was priceless. I still feel that there's lots to learn, lots to do.
Wow. Let's do it.
Yes.
I'm really excited about hearing about your dreams and seeing you transform.
Your story is so inspiring in so many facets. I think a lot of my journey is understanding divinity, and it like hearing your story, it feels like everything aligned perfectly. Out of all the colleges you applied to, the one and only one that you truly needed was Cal State Northridge.
Yeah.
And then they had a department for Central American Voices, and just your whole experience and just like all the things that were limiting you or what people were projecting onto you. And you just needed that one voice to see you, and you needed to see her and feel like there's representation. And if I can just see one person representing, then I can also represent myself and I can represent my country. And I love that you brought up filmmaking, because that was going to be my follow-up question. So much of you becoming a filmmaker was because of the way media has portrayed your country.
Yes.
And with that, where are you now in your career with your filmmaking, and how have you changed that narrative?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, going to college and like working filmmaking and doing that blend, like I knew, like I was like, all I want to focus on life is doing filmmaking and Central America, like the focus on Central America. I knew since like ago. I was like, this is my calling, you know?
Your purpose.
Yeah, my purpose. But of course, like getting closer to my graduation, I knew that I don't have a very linear career because of my status. It's not that I can go and apply to production companies or studios and get a job and, you know. And I think at the end of that, I was very like, okay, what am I going to do? You know, I know like I want to have films and create films as a director. I love producing, but as a director and producer, like I want to be in and do films that represents my people, you know, but also not only in front of the camera, but also behind the camera as well, to have like that also representation of like people who are bringing you the voices in front of camera. But I knew like, it was like one of those points in my life that I was like, what can I do? And that's how Central American Voices podcast was born.
Love that we're talking about your podcast now. So, your podcast, Central American Voices, you started in 2020. And obviously, that was a crazy time for all of us collectively. So, at this point, you've already graduated, right? So, the world is shut down. What led you to want to begin your podcast, and specifically Central American Voices? Again, kind of talking about your story and your purpose. It's so important for you, for people to recognize the stories that come out of Central America. So what has that podcast journey been like for you?
Oh my God, it's crazy. Like, the podcast is my baby. But like, you know how I said, like, it was like one of the moments of my life that I was like, I cannot do like what I want to do in filmmaking, but I want to have a space for our voices to be heard. I didn't know nothing about podcasting at all. That went to YouTube University. And I decided to have, like, call it Central American Voices, because like going through school and also like the program that I noticed that even research was not a lot done by us. You know, a lot of research, you know, even film sometimes, and other aspects of like Central American education and academia and media, it's not done by us. And I was like, why? Why can we talk about our actual experiences? So that's how the podcast started. And I started planning it, honestly, when I graduated in 2019. So there was a lot of platforms about Central America and online, Instagram and Facebook. And I started following, like, of course, like way before I even thought of having a podcast. And I was noticing, I was like, oh, this is a sense of community that I never had, you know, especially here in the States. So I started talking with a bunch of people, and I was like, I want to create this podcast. So eventually it became a reality. We recorded our first episode, I think, before the world shut down. And yeah, it was because of that, because I was like, we don't have a lot of our stories being told from our perspective. When we started with the podcast, like, a lot of people came and like support us, and it was one of those things that, you know, in my podcast I always said, like, you can go and talk about your personal life, and it's not all academics, like, it's not all politics, it's like come and talk. Like, you don't have to be like someone who like a career, a book, a musician and all that. Like, it's just personal experience, because I believe so much that we can all learn from personal experience. So the community was there, and I was like, people were like, oh my God, like, I relate so much to those stories. I never found a place where I can hear my own accent, I can hear my own experiences, I can find my place away from those media ports that sometimes, like, oh, like, if you're Salvadoran, you're Guatemalan, like, you have like this, like, you know, gangs and like corruption, everything happening like on actual, like, you know, media outlets. And then I come to this podcast, and it's like, I'm hearing people like myself talk about what was to be Central American. That is honestly the first question I was like, has it been to grow up as a Central American? Because our experiences are so diverse. I have interviewed people that is even like in Spain and Bulgaria, like, and all those experiences are so wonderful. And I have learned so much from so many people. So like, honestly, like, the podcast has brought like such a sense of like community that I found online, but I have been able to actually get to know the people, you know? But at the same time,
I'm really, really proud of you, because like you said, you started the podcast with a co-host and then ended up going your separate ways, but you didn't let that deter you from continuing the importance of the work of the podcast, right? And I know that a lot of the podcast was just starting out, you know, simple equipment and nothing, you know, no visuals, just audio, and just starting it. And I think for a lot of people starting anything, it's like they need to have this. Like, I remember when I was starting the podcast, I was like, oh, I need to have this person for this, I need to do this. And it's like you start overanalyzing it, but at the end of the day, when you just need to get that message out, it will be received by the people that want to hear your message, you know? And I think there's something to be said about the online platforms and using social media, using the internet to your advantage. And if you don't feel like you don't have community in your own physical community, you have the online community for that. And I just want to give you your flowers, both physically and verbally, because you are such a beautiful woman. And I think the work that you're doing is extremely unique. And it's very powerful, and it's unique to the Central American community and the supporters like myself. So before we touch on the filmmaking and your film that you're working on, and then the documentary that we're going to be working on together, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Isabel Grace. And your favorite flowers are lilies. So is there any connection that you have to lilies specifically, or are they just your favorite?
Honestly, I didn't even know what they were called. I moved here to the States, and I remember I would walk. There was this flower stand by the school that I would go, high school, and I would always watch it, and there was just beautiful lilies all the time. So every time, I don't know, every time I would pass, and I would just see them. And then one time I remember going there, it was what is that flower called? It's lilies. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful.
So beautiful.
Yeah, so that is why I love them so much. It's just, it's a reminder of the walk that I used to take from school to my house.
See, that's a beautiful story. And this is why I always like to ask our guests, and I think just being a woman, and I think having that connection to flowers, buying yourselves flowers, and catering to yourself and loving yourself. So we have to wrap up the podcast pretty soon, but before we do, I do want to talk about your film, Glimmer. So how can the MíraLA community support you and your film?
So for this, once we go out, we're going to do a fundraiser party in Nativo. We're planning all those that, so I will share the details, and all those funds will go, of course, to fund our post-production and distribution platform, not platform, but distribution portion, which is film festivals. But Glimmer is such a sweet story that I'm so excited to share to everybody, and that's how people can support it. And also on follow us on Instagram, follow us the journey that filmmaking takes. So
Do you guys have a Instagram for Glimmer?
Yes. It's watch Glimmer.
Watch Glimmer.
Watch Glimmer.
So MíraLA community, please check out Watch Glimmer on socials to support, and then we'll have all of that information on the show notes as well.
Thank you.
And then quickly again, before we wrap up as well, I am so excited to be working with you and Brenda on the documentary that's untitled as of right now, as of today. But when I heard your story and I heard Brenda's story about wanting to give back to your country and share the experiences that the children go through, I was a full supporter, and as a filmmaker myself, as a young producer, and wanting to support women in filmmaking, it felt so aligned. And I'm just so grateful for here today to have the relationship that we have, but to know that it's only going to get closer.
Yes.
And we're going to not only connect on a collaborative team, but also creatively.
Yes.
And we're going to share a very powerful message through a documentary film. So thank you for giving me that opportunity through my company MíraLA and your company Luz, right?
Our Productions.
Our Lou Productions. So thank you for that. I'm really excited for us to collaborate together.
I'm so excited. And thank you so much for believing the story. I think when Brenda told me, I was just girl, you cannot even ask me twice.
Right.
I was this is so real, the struggles that happen in our country, but also the message that we want to make with the documentary, and also to share it with the world. So having you and believing in the story, and and also empowering women, and supporting education in Central America, which is very goes hand in hand with what we do. So no, thank you so much. And then I can not only wait for all the journey that you, Brenda, and I are gonna go together.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you.
And we're gonna be having a crossover podcast episode. So you guys stay tuned. You'll catch me on Central American Voices.
Yes. So we can talk all about the film.
Tell me about your production company, Arlu, and what is the message or the mission behind that?
So Arlu Production, I dream, of course, of having a production company, you know what I mean? And for me, it was it's, of course, to do filmmaking, but for me, it's as a support a lot of undocumented filmmakers, because I think, like I said, there's a lot of times I have to be teaching other producers how to pay undocumented filmmakers. So for me, I was okay, let me have my company. I'll hire you under me. I know how to handle that. You know what I mean?
I love that.
But a lot of the message is about in the name. So our is our, and lu means tierra in Lenca, which comes from the language from my mom's town. So together means nuestra tierra, our land productions.
That's so beautiful.
And it's because I want to create as much films and anything that has to be with our community stories. So yeah, that's the message behind it. That's my mission.
You are a powerhouse of a woman. So all you guys in our community, please follow Alejandra on social media. So put all your plugs because I want everyone to support you as much as they can.
No, thank you. You can find my personal one at Al Quiroz, and then the podcast is Centam Voices Podcast, and then the production is Our Lou Productions.
Go follow her and support her.
No, thank you so much for having me, Arianna. This was so much fun.
This is so much fun. Thank you. Gracias.
Yay,
Prima.
Prima.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the MíraLA Podcast. If you are a woman and would like to be on the show, go to MíraLaPodcast.com. Follow us on socials at MíraLA Podcast. Use hashtag MíraLA Mondays. And if you want to support the show, subscribe, share with your amigos, and tune in for new episodes every Monday. Muchas gracias.